What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with. We're going to be talking about life before prison, life in prison, and life out of prison. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that will help you knock down some of the prisons you've built up in your own mind. So, folks, today my guest is Ed Levinson. Ed, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I want to give you guys a little, so this is a little bit of a turn because Ed and I actually weren't at Leavenworth at the same time. But I want to share a little story with you about, Ed is a great guy. You're going to enjoy him. He's a great storyteller. But Ed and I were at a car dealership, and he had just gotten back, and I had just gotten started at the car dealership. And I was going crazy. I only had a few months left. You probably, I hope you remember this, Ed, but I was looking at places on the internet of trying to see what a federal prison looked like on the inside, which there aren't very many pictures of that.
No.
So you came in my office one day and you said, well, Brent, you know, because Ed's a builder and builds homes. And he said, I can draw you a picture of what Leavenworth looks like. And you took out a piece of paper and you had a pen and you drew Leavenworth camp. And, you know, the A block, B block, C block, D block, and the cafeteria, everything laid out. And I got to tell you, it was something that really calmed my mind in such a weird way, because it was like, oh, okay, I think I know now, okay, what I'm walking into. This looks like I know where I'm going.
And you had no idea yet.
No, but Ed, I know it probably wasn't a big deal to you, but to me at that time, it was like that I had something. It was like, okay, I'm going to deal with this. This is what I've got, and this is the map of the place, and I'm going to walk in. So it was a big help to me. And you actually drew a good picture too.
Thanks.
So, folks, Ed, this is somewhat ironic because we are sitting about a half mile from Windcrest, which is one of the most beautiful neighborhood developments.
Not even this backyard.
Yeah, backyard.
They share backyards.
Is right here.
Right.
One of the most beautiful neighborhood developments in Wildwood. And, you know, you built really beautiful homes. And you know, I guess Wildwood, Creve Coeur, Eureka, Chesterfield. You just did a wonderful job. Walk me back, Ed. How did you get into, as a kid, is that what you were thinking? You wanted to be a builder?
Yeah, to a large extent, I always wanted to be in the building. My father was in the home building business, and I held my father as my idol. Mm-hmm. The man was a great athlete in school. He was a captain of his college baseball and basketball teams and president of his class.
Where at?
At Washington University. Got there when they had athletic scholarships, and they played big-time schools like USC and Notre Dame.
Wow.
And stuff like that. But it was always intrigued me, the real estate business, the development business, the creating, and that's what I ended up when I went to school, studied political science and urban
We've
studies.
got that in common.
We had that
really
in common.
been able to use that one.
Well, I mean, in the building business and in the development business, the real estate business, 3/4 of it is politics.
Sure it is.
It's how do you get a building permit? How do you get a zoning approval?
Yeah.
How do you get along with inspectors?
Yeah.
Politics is not just also with the government itself. It's how
Every
we
day.
deal organization to organization.
Yeah.
And how do you get your message conveyed and everything. And so it was significant. I had a history where I got into it, and my father didn't want to get into it, and I ended up working for some other builders, and The subdivision right across the street here, which was Winding Trails, I ran that for a couple of years for another builder as a superintendent on site and everything. And that's why I'm very familiar with this whole valley right here. My father actually owned the area that's Point Clayton right on the corner there for years and sold it. And
this is kind of like Levinson World Valley.
It really, I mean, it is to an extent, but it's a great deal of pride that you feel when you can build and create.
See it.
You got lakes and water fields and people.
Well, this Windcrest has a lot of waterfalls and water as you drive in, which is unique.
Yeah, I just so enjoyed doing it. I mean, I built about 1,500 homes over the years, and the whole thing with the crash and everything else is I never had a suit filed against me. Yeah. I never had a Better Business complaint filed against me. Yeah. Never didn't pay a bill in my whole life. And all of a sudden,
the world comes
crashing down.
Well, let's back up a little bit, because your dad was in the business. I know your brother Tom, and he's in the business. So in high school and growing up, did you play sports? I
played sports. I played football. I was an offensive guard. And just absolutely loved it.
What was home life like? What was the home life like?
Home life, it was phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, I led a charmed life in many respects. My father was very successful, and my mother was adored throughout the community. She was very active in charities and everything, but she was a full-time stay-at-home mom in that regard, and she would take us to, the soccer moms were old, to all the games and traveling around. And so I had a lot of advantages, but on the other hand, when I was in junior high school is when I started working, and I worked on a golf course maintenance.
Did you?
Cutting greens, fairways, raking sand traps, and putting irrigation lines in and laying sod. And
well, we have something in common on that, because I did that at Fort Leavenworth golf course, and
that was a cush job. That was one of the best jobs.
It was.
Everybody wanted to get that. Yeah. For some reason, I couldn't get that. Partly because of the restitution that my restitution. They said that I was too big of a risk. Yeah. But then I started working as a laborer for my father on the thing, which is the irony.
So you really started from the ground up.
I started as the ground up. I got to my father's subdivision one weekend day and everything else, and or one day during the summer, and my father, I said, okay, I'm here to work, and want me to sell houses, you want me to do it? He says, no, take this hammer, take this broom, and take this hose. And
you said, I'm out here to sell houses.
And I'm 14 years old, I was a football player,
the world.
I'm in good shape. And he said, take these and go out, and the county's complained that there's dirt and concrete on the street.
Okay.
And you've got to clean off the curbs and gutters. Mm-hmm. And break the concrete off, hose the whole street down, and everything else. I go out there, and then I do that, and I clean it up and shovel and everything else, and that's how I started. Now it comes years later to tell you how things come full circle. Is I get to Leavenworth and I get caught with a cigarette.
Okay.
And the CEO at the time was a guy Bulldog, who was basically in charge, and he had
kind of looked like a bulldog.
He had he had four people that he had caught doing various things, and he told us all to meet on the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and or 8 o'clock in the morning at the Bubble. And we did that, and he brings us out to the visitors' room to the sidewalk out front, and he grabs some shovel and brooms and hose, and he says, okay, as your punishment, you're going to clean the curbs and gutters on this street in front of the Visitors Bureau and get all the dirt and everything out of here. I'm going, how is this full circle? Here I am, 45 years later, after being successful and everything else, and I find myself, I'm right back at my very first job.
At 14 years old.
Oh, God.
That is full circle.
Oh, it is full circle. But, I worked my way up. I worked for a guy doing the very first, I went to Washington University and studied urban studies, and I got an internship working for the mayor of the city of St. Louis in federal grants and economic development for a summer. And then I got a job right out of college working for another guy called the Deutsche Partnership, in which we did the very first loft building on Washington Avenue.
Really?
Back in 1981.
Wow.
And so my responsibility there was leasing it, overseeing the renovation. It wasn't a complete rehab in the way that he was doing it, but we put lofts in and stuff like that. And some people I'm actually Facebook friends with today were some of my clients back then. And so did that for a couple of years, and then I went and worked for this other home builder for a few years, doing customer service and then supervision work and everything else. And I always wanted to get into the business myself, and I kept on finding pieces of ground, and I did what I thought might be good. I'd go to my father, I'd say, Dad, how about doing this?
What do you think of this?
He says, no, I'm retired. I don't want to mess with this crap and all this other stuff. And I finally brought one piece to him that was a hard piece to assemble with a bunch of errors, and it was, I could get it zoned for 24 homes in the new school district, which is the nicest school district in St. Louis. And I talked to my boss that I was working for, a guy named Chuck Liebert, and I said, Chuck, I got this piece. Would you be, interested in doing this? He said, Eddie, I'll tell you what, if you do this, I'll put up the money, you run it, and we can do it. And I said, well, let me just talk to my father. I'm going to give my father one last chance. Yeah. And I went in, and my father was also friends with this Chuck Liebert guy. And I went into my father, and I said, Dad, look, this is what I found. I found this piece of property. It's here. This is how I can lay it out. This is what it's going to cost. I can do this. And I've even got Chuck Liebert lined up that he'll do the financing. He'll partner with us and everything else. And he said, you know what? To hell with Chuck. You and I, we'll do it. We're partners.
So he jumped in.
We're partners. Let's do this. And then I built that subdivision, sold out very well. And then my other two brothers eventually joined me, and we built up the family company. I just said, come on in, you're a partner, and went that way. And we built, like I said, about 15 different developments and
really nice developments.
1,500 homes. And
I mean, something to very, very proud of. I'm sure when we were talking about before we got on the podcast here, just driving down the road here of Clayton Road. I mean, that's something when you drive by it, that subdivision stands out.
Well, thank you.
It really is.
Just a lot of pride in what we did, and it was a lot of what my father had done too. Yeah. My father maintained a great relationship. He had other major builders that were still living in one of his homes.
Yeah.
Because I asked him, I said, why don't you build one of your own? And I'm not even going to say who it was. And he said, what? I've got a beautiful home. It's a brick house. It's a rear entry garage in a great location.
It's good.
Why would I move? And so that was the highest compliment that
I would think
somebody could pay. But that's what I did, and I absolutely loved it. Got involved with some other stuff in terms of building a Hilton Garden Inn hotel in the Chesterfield Valley. And I did a commercial project where I did a shopping center and
Well, I mean, you got involved with Chesterfield. You were on the.
I was on the city council.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was. My father had been building in Chesterfield and built an area, and I found some property and built a beautiful subdivision called Chesterfield Estates on Wild Horse Creek Road that was there. And as I'm doing the development, I ran into the very first public works director for the city of Chesterfield. Mm-hmm. I knew the assistant street superintendent or the assistant director from building in a prior subdivision, another subdivision I did in Maryland Heights, where he was a street director. And I saw him drive up in the subdivision, and I go down and I talked to him, and I said, good to see you. And he said, Ed, I want you to meet. This is my new boss. This is, Bill Hahn. He's our new director of public works. And I said, Bill, it's a pleasure meeting you. I said, if there's anything that you like or anything you want to know or do that I can do to help or whatever or answer, just please let me know. Because I always made a point of, and that comes from political science and everything else, bend over backwards and do it the way that they're asking. You don't need a fight on everything. I mean, there's no reason. Yeah, the fight's going to be a lot more costly. Just doing and making the inspector or the regulator happy and proud, and the neighbors proud. Mm-hmm. I got more zonings, but I never lost lots than anybody else because I always did what we said we would do. And I always talked to the neighbors, before I did a development to try to build consensus. And that was part of the training that, that we had. But the guy says, well, good to meet you. He said, but listen, buddy, let me tell you something. From now on, things in Chesterfield are going to be done the right way. And I looked at him. I said, what? I'm sorry. And he said, from now on, developers are not going to get away with all the stuff they did. From now on, things in Chesterfield are going to be done the right way. Now, I took that as an affront because I'm just building a nice subdivision before you get there. This is right when Chesterfield became a city. My father built a couple thousand homes in Chesterfield.
Right.
And that was what, the thing. And then he was basically saying that he got away with stuff. And he kept on doing things against development, against growth. And there's a group of people that were against anything growth. And a community needs growth. It needs balance. I mean, when I was in the city council, I came up and I said, let's come up with a statement, mission statement. We're for Chesterfield's a great place to live, work, and play.
Yeah.
It's not just a bedroom community. It's 28 square miles, 50,000 people.
Right.
Don't do that. And so some people talked me into the mayor, some council members, some other residents, everything else talked me into running for the council against an incumbent who supported everything that this public works director did because he blamed builders for everything.
You were the enemy.
And we were the enemy. Anybody in the building and real estate business was the enemy. And so I ended up running, and I ran against the stupid things they were doing. $800,000 street study instead of spending $800,000 to fix the streets.
Right.
They hired a consultant for $800,000.
They make good money.
It was just some absurd things. So I won. It was fun running the campaign. Just got everybody involved. It was Republicans, Democrats. I had some big hitters that were just doing it out of friendship and everything else, and neighbors. And they had an interview with the people in City Hall, and were the staff, with new council members. And I met with the finance director. I met with the planning director. I get to the public works director, and he asked the other guy that was there the first time that we met to sit in on the meeting and everything else. He says, council member, congratulations. If there's anything I can do. I said, Bill, do you remember the first time we met? He said, no. I said, we met when we were at Chesterfield Estates, and you told me, Bud, from now on, things are going to be done the right way.
Yeah.
I said, well, let me tell you something, Bill. I ran because of you. I won because of you. And from now on, things in Chesterfield are going to be done the right way. He starts stammering, oh, no. I walk out of the meeting later with this assistant director, the assistant director. I said, did I was my memory? He said, oh, no, you were spot on. He said, I loved it. The guy was an arront bastard.
So was he there the whole time you were there?
No, he finally, I got him. I got him to quit and, putting the pressure on because you couldn't do it. I believed in building consensus.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, there'd be a better world if we had that going on in the real world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always, things are
getting things done, building consensus. That should be the work of the way of the politics.
You look for a win-win, and that's the way I used to do business, win-win.
Yeah.
Even when the whole thing crashed with the real estate, I had all my contractors in for group meetings to say, this is what's going on. Here's what it is. I was open.
Well, lead me into that because you went from having and building and having a proud company and looking at all the houses that you were building. 2008 hits. What walk me through the world that you started dealing with.
I studied the real estate industry, real estate economics. Thought I knew generally how things would go, what things historically have done. And I had a policy of that the people that really got hurt in recessions and builders were the ones that were overexposed. If you owed too much on a piece of property or on a house, you could get killed with interest and everything else. So what I did was I always made it a practice over the 25 years I built, pay down that loan as quick as you can. Don't take out a full amount of loan if you can. Keep a bunch of equity in it because you can always have the equity if you need the cash. And so I had, like on these lots next door, I they were worth about $250,000, and I sold a couple lots to some other builders for $250,000
to build in there.
And I was building $1 million houses, which the rule of thumb is a quarter to a third of your value of your cost can be in the lot. So during that, I'm $250,000. I owed the bank $120,000 a lot. So I had, a bunch of lots. I had a lot of equity built up in there. And I started running short on cash as there was a dip. There was a recession. I was running out, and sales were when things stopped, they stopped with sales.
Yeah.
And we had a few sales that were still going and everything else and doing it, but I was starting to run out of cash. And so I talked to the bank. I said, okay, I need to get a loan for cash because to be able to pay interest and carry and overhead.
To make it work.
I need to get some cash. They said, no problem. We'll just order an appraisal. And they ordered an appraisal, and the appraisal came back, and the guy said it was worth $130,000 a lot. Because now with the real estate crash and loaners, banks aren't lending on it and everything else. And they said, oh, you're upside down. You owe us 120. You have to have 80%, 70% loan to value.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have it. And I, with overhead, trying to pay that, keep people employed that had worked, ran out of cash, couldn't get a loan. I talked to a couple other banks. They were ready to do it, but the control of the currency was basically telling them in Missouri, if you lend to a builder or real estate, we will write it off as a loss.
A loss.
So you cannot lend to any builders.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden there's no money whatsoever for it. And the bank took back, and a week and a half later, I get a knock on the door at my office because I've let go of all my staff. I've got nothing going. I know I owe people money, but I can work it out.
Right.
It's an FBI agent. And he says, I'm here because I think I know you committed bank fraud. I said, no, I'll show you all my workers. I have immaculate records. They'll do whatever. And he says, no, I think you did it. And he said, you'll hear from us. And a couple of days later, we get a subpoena for all of our records.
All your records.
And books and everything. And I remember talking to somebody there was an attorney that also had a business in the city. They knew all these people in the business they were in. I don't want to say the names in terms of FBI and probation and cops and everything else. And I told him that, I said, I got visited by the FBI. He said, oh, Eddie, you're screwed. I said, no, I'm not. I know I'm not because my books are 100% perfect, clean. I've got a CFO that's owned the thing that puts everything together. I trust my Uncle Lou and everything else, and there's no doubt. I know where every penny went. I did not divert funds from one to another. I didn't lie on any forms and everything else. The bank did their own appraisals. So I've got nothing to worry about. And I said, the advantages these FBI guys are, they're lawyers, they're accountants, they're some smart people. He said, no, they're idiots. I said, no, they're not. They're really not. These are smart people. Because I studied political science. I studied the criminal justice system.
Right.
I even interviewed
Constitutional
for
law.
a paper, the prosecuting attorney for St. Louis County.
Yeah.
I did a paper on that. And he said, no, Eddie, you're screwed. And so I basically called an attorney. I said, we're going to fight this thing. I said, because they said I misused funds. I didn't use funds the way they were intended to. And I said, where? What? I can account for every penny of this. I even stopped taking a salary the last 6 months of operations because I wanted to keep the cash flow. I didn't need it.
And at this time, the whole world has gone nosedive.
Oh, the whole world's nosedive, everything that you've done. And I talked to this attorney, and it's just a miserable thing. At that, the way that he represented me or didn't, said he would. I had to give him all the money. And then he said, you got to plead. And I said, what do you mean I got to plead? I said, I haven't done a damn thing. He says, oh, no, the feds never lose. And you got a couple days to decide. But basically they're saying they'll give you 51 months, and which you serve 80% of and stuff like that. And you can go to a camp. Or if you go to trial, they're going to find you guilty, and they're going to put you away for 15 years behind the wall.
Yeah. Or more. It could be more, because they stack those charges. So, they could take one charge of bank fraud and stack it 15 times.
Oh.
And you're talking to 20 years on each one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's what they did with my restitution.
Yeah.
They came up with a restitution.
So what are you thinking when that hits you right over the head?
Well, I mean, this is now taking a year. It took them literally from the time that they came in my door. They asked for things. We gave them me and my wife and I, we made 30,000 copies of all these bills, invoices, all these things that they were looking for, and turned them over to them over a couple-month period. After 2.5 months after that first contact, so a week after they got my last, page of the 30 thing, they filed an indictment me for 10 counts of bank fraud.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, absolutely floored. Usually you see investigations last years, and we were doing $25 million worth of business a year.
Right.
So how they came up with all those answers and
that fast,
it was incredible. But your mind just starts
spinning.
Growing, and I got into a point where I was trying to defend.
Were you having conversations with? It sounds like your wife was involved, helping you with the business and doing the copies.
She was helping with the liquidation, and it was just.
So these must have been interesting conversations you guys were having about how this was all going down.
Yeah, it was. Part of it is, and I'll be the first to admit, I almost got into a catatonic state.
Yeah.
Because anything I touched was now all of a sudden from being. Everything I touched was good and successful. I lived a charmed life. Had a place in Naples, Florida, and could travel around the world.
I even heard you used to be a decent golfer.
I was a golfer. I played 2-3 days a week where I could play, had fun.
Yeah.
At it, and like I said, it was a charmed life. And I had built up some great value and equity in investments, but all of a sudden they were all gone.
Yeah.
Because things were praising.
Yeah, everything was underwater.
Nobody could sell anything, and I just was sat back and just said, I can't touch anything. I can't do anything. I came up with my defense in terms of telling my lawyer, look, here's case law. Explained everything to him, get him, and said, write this, letter, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a whole story.
Please help me.
Please help me, and then at the end, it comes and. Decide that, I'm going to just plead guilty. I'm going to plead guilty to one count. I am not pleading guilty to these other ones.
Yeah.
And it was where basically they said that I lied to the title company. And that's where the attorney said, well, you signed this affidavit that said all bills are paid or will be paid to the title company, and which is true because we did that on every house we closed. For my whole career, my father's whole career, that same piece of paper.
I'm going to fix your microphone because it sounds better when you get up there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Here, just keep talking.
We signed the same piece of paper for every house, every real estate transaction ever done. It signs that final affidavit to a title company.
Yeah.
Well, they said that because the title company, the person that bought the house, had a mortgage. And the mortgage was through a mortgage company that was owned by a bank. And the bank relied on the title company affidavit. That makes it bank fraud because not all bills were paid.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting there saying, well, okay, I signed that thing. I'll do that. Well, they came up and the person on that house actually wrote a letter of support for me to the judge. And she actually happened to be a vice president of the bank.
Yeah.
On the thing, and it was a very nice letter that she wrote saying that she didn't think she felt hurt or injured or whatever. The bank lost nothing on the loan, as it turns out, because the person paid their mortgage. The title company paid any bills that were outstanding. Right. So the title company did get hurt, but it wasn't. The bank never saw the final affidavit. The bank just said, "Can we get title insurance?" Yeah. And they did get title insurance.
They did get title insurance.
And so they took that thing with no loss, and they ended up turning it into a $13.5 million worth of restitution. And because they took the cost of any bills I had, let's just say $100,000 or $50,000 outstanding on that house, they then said, okay, the customer got hurt for $50,000, the bank got hurt for $50,000, the contractor got hit for $50,000, and the title company got hit for $50,000. That's $250,000.
Yeah.
And that's how they did it.
That's how they multiplied it up.
Anything the bank lost in value, they said, well, that's because of your fraud.
We're going to multiply that.
And so now when I go to the camp, $13.5 million with the restitution, I'm as evil as they'll find.
Oh yeah.
I'm just one badass.
Yeah.
There's me and the child rapers and the mother rapers and the father stabbers and mass murderers and everything else. And I'm Ed, the one that everybody keeps away from because now
you're the Ed big guy, restitution guy. So Ed, you decide to plead.
Yeah. Which I to this day still regret.
Yeah. I know you and I have talked about that. What's life like as you went in, you went to the courtroom and you had to plead guilty. How much time did you have between the time you pled guilty and had to report?
I pled guilty in January.
Yeah.
And when I submitted 103 letters of support to the court a couple days before a sentencing hearing, the prosecutor went to the court and said, somebody in his family got sick, and we can postpone it for a couple months.
Wow.
So they postponed it, and in the meantime, the prosecutor said, we can get just as many letters.
Just as many letters in reverse, yeah.
But we're not going to, but we could if we wanted to.
Sure.
And so they did that in, I think it was June.
It's a lot of letters.
It was a lot of letters.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court said that the judge could pay attention to letters being written, particularly in this one case where 12 letters were written. And the judge could do that, and doing a downward departure could pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Is how this.
We got somebody calling Ed right now.
Yeah.
It's a judge who's listening to you talk.
It was.
So do you had time, I guess, to figure out, what you found
I got my postcard.
You got your postcard telling you where you're going. What was your thought about that?
On that, and all of a sudden it's Leavenworth. I was talking about Marion, which is right down the street or something like that, or around the corner. And I'd even, after sentencing, I even went to a guy that had been at Marion to his restaurant and just had a bunch of scotches, and I don't drink. Yeah. Or Maker's Mark it was at the time, and he was just sitting there going, holy cow. And I was just, catatonic. And I get the postcard saying I'm going to Leavenworth. Yeah. And I start trying to learn a little bit about Leavenworth. Right. And there's not much you can learn. No. You go on site and you sort of see a layout of the camp, and you read up. There's one book out, but not much. And so I don't know what to do. I've never spent a day. The only time I spent in jail in my life was in 8th grade. I went on a field trip with myself and a guy named Eric Herhold as a social studies project to tour the St. Louis City Workhouse.
Oh, my gosh.
And
you were in 8th grade?
In 8th grade. That was my social science project that took on and everything else. And so I at least saw
the feel of it.
A feel of it, but I didn't have a slightest idea what I'm getting into. And
so the day of, you get there. How did you get there?
I got there. My wife drove me up there, and I had a lunch. We got to be there by 1 o'clock. Right. I had a lunch at Arby's because I knew it would be the last time I had that night. I had a good meal. Didn't sleep too well, and we get up and you see the big. House.
I don't know if everybody knows. Arby's is America's roast beef. Yes, sir. I just saw that the other day. And
I don't know. Yeah, okay, I can believe
that's
that.
a terrible way to screw up your story there. So anyway, you drive
pull up to this, and there's a big circular drive where you see this big dome and stairs leading up to this prison and everything else. And
a lot of stairs.
You got double row razor wire fencing surrounding this thing and guard towers, and you're looking at a wall on the side of this thing that's about 35 feet tall, and supposedly it's 30 feet in the ground. Yeah. And this is, the prison of prisons, and you're just like, holy cow. And I get out of the car in this circuit drive, and a guard comes up and says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm here to report. Mm-hmm. He says, well, come on over to the gate. I said, well, let me say goodbye to my wife or whatever. And So I went and gave my wife a kiss and a hug goodbye and everything else. And I walk up and you go under into the bowels.
Yeah.
You don't go up the steps.
No.
Like a real person.
No.
You go through the gate into the portal where you go down into the cellar.
Mm-hmm. What did it feel like with the gates opening and closing behind you?
There's a surreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, literally surreal. It's you march in. There was 4 of us that he ended up bringing in, together that we congregated outside, and you walk in, and the gate closing is not that bad because it's just a fence rattling and closing or whatever. You go into the big house, and there's a big door that slams, behind you, and it's all concrete. Mm-hmm. That actually, when I worked for the masonry department, we ended up replacing the floor tiles in there. Yeah. A year and a half later. But you go in there and it's just stark, and they strip you down as you're naked, squat and spread, so they can look up your ass and make sure you're not coming in with something. Yeah. And it's very humiliating. And then you're put into a box. Now, luckily with us, because I'd heard of guys that spent 3 months up there. Yeah. Because it was overcrowded. The camp counselor came up, and within 2 hours.
Okay, so you didn't.
We were driving down to the camp. So it was incredible just walking in through the visiting room. Now, mind you, it's 112 degrees outside on an August 10th day. Mm-hmm. It is a clear sky, no wind. And it's 112, and the camp has no air conditioning. Right. No heat. Well, it's got heat, sort of, but no air conditioning, terrible windows. So you're literally 115, 120 inside. Right. I mean, you people have no idea, no concept what that's like, because the brick walls keep and retain all the heat and everything else. It's incredible, and you walk in to this thing, and you've got on these shoes that are work boots, and
they're not good.
They're heavy as hell with steel-tipped toes, and they walk us up to our thing. At the time, ours was different than yours. That the B2, the back of B2, was for all new arrivals. Okay. And so there's a couple guys up there that were old timers that were, the guy that would oversee that area or whatever, and some of the nicest guys or whatever, but. You walk up there, and it's just a big room with 32 bunks. Yeah. And then there's a bathroom, and then behind there's 36 bunks in a thing. And now you said, okay, here's your bunk. Yeah. And you're just like, holy shit, as you're dripping sweat and everything else, and you're sitting on your mattress, and then they walk you down the laundry room. You're talking about going downstairs into the bowels of the thing. You go past the Latin TV room, the Mexican TV room, into the cage, and you get your linens and stuff. And so I get up there, and I'm sitting in my bed or whatever, just freaking out. Mm-hmm. This is just a miserable thing.
Well, your world feels so small at that time because you have a bed, a chair, and a locker. That's what your world shrunk to.
That's all you got. Yeah. I mean, I've gone from big houses and this and that and nice cars. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I've got nothing but a locker. Yeah. And my cot. Yeah. And on the thing, and well, there's a guy Slim also took the bunk above me. Okay. And there's a black guy from the city of St. Louis and everything else, a young kid, about 20, 21 years old or whatever, and, into, drugs or whatever. And he had a big gold tooth and everything else. And he looks down at me, over the bed. He just says, Ed, I just want to tell you, take it easy. You'll be okay. Okay. Because I'm just like, I think I'm openly sobbing. I don't know. I'm just.
Things have never been quite this
It is
bad.
The most surreal experience you can ever imagine. Yeah. I get up and I start walking around to try to find out, what's where. Yeah. And a guy that's in the front of B2 sits there and he says, "Are you Ed Levinson?"
Oh, no.
And I said, Yeah. How do you know? He said, well, because my parents told me you were coming. They were just at your estate sale.
Oh, my God.
And I was going, what are you talking about? He said, oh, yeah, my parents, they live over here, and and you were having an estate sale because you were moving out of your house. I said, yeah, I've lost everything. I had to sell it. They said, oh, yeah, they were just there. They said you had some really nice stuff and everything. And they met your wife. She was really nice and everything. I said, oh, my God, okay. So, and he helped me. And he gave me a padlock. And so now I've got, something.
Somebody's helping you get set up.
And then then I go downstairs and I walk, and there's the cafeteria area. Yeah. And a guy comes out the door of the cafeteria areas. I'm walking, in a catonic state like the zombie or some zombie sort of limping along and just in a daze. He goes, hey, are you Tom Levinson's brother?
Oh, my God.
And I said, what? Yes. He said, I said, how do you know, what do you, he said, oh, you just look like him. I like Tom. Tom's a friend of mine. I said, oh, wow. He says, hey, do you need any soda? Let me get you something. He takes me up to his place, and he breaks it in. Gene was his name. It was a super nice guy.
Helps you out.
And then I met Max, who was, with the, Max might have still been there when you were. He's an older guy that helped with the church and everything else, and they give you some toiletries and stuff like that, and you start working, and at least I started feeling
like somebody, you were starting to feel like people are going to help you to help get set up.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that
well, you don't know.
The way that I was in school and everything else, I was a social scientist. I studied political science, urban studies, sociology, economics, and history and stuff like that. I've studied the criminal justice system. Yeah. I know people can adapt, and I'm ready to adapt and everything else, but this is just...
It's a big one.
A big one, and you're sweating. It's the most miserable experience when you've got 115 degrees in your thing, and you're just sweating your butt off or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was a hell of a shocker.
So you get into this, and you get somewhat set up. Ed, because I remember you were telling me that you worked. Was it the paint shop?
I started out in masonry. So, as you were getting, how long did it take for you to feel like, talking about adapting, that you began to feel like, okay, I'm starting to understand how I'm going to live here? Well, number one, there's, Chris and a few of the people there were very kind, and I was also a cigarette smoker, and cigarette smoker.
You guys were everywhere.
Well, the cigarette smoker in prison is like the pot smokers in high school.
Yeah, exactly.
We knew who each other were. We could always count on each other. We wouldn't tell on each other, and you always had something to talk about.
Exactly.
And so we would get together, and Chris, and we're smoking in the back stairwell, stairwell.
Because it truly wasn't allowed, but it was, from the standpoint, it depended on what prison guard was on, but they didn't really like to mess with it.
Well, it depends not only what prison guard or whatever, but it depends what prison. Yeah. Because I later got transferred, and while I got caught in Leavenworth a couple times, no big deal. And even my CO boss at the paint shop and everything else, they knew that we were smoking. At Pekin, where I got transferred a year and a half later, they found some and threw me in solitary confinement in the hole for 21 days.
That's different.
For tobacco, which is, just...
Wasn't quite as big a deal at Leavenworth as it was Pekin.
Not quite a big deal at Leavenworth, but it was... that helped with the camaraderie of feeling where you had a group, a sense of belonging group. Yeah. And I also had a determination that my wife was going to visit, hopefully in another, couple months, because trying to get in touch with her, didn't know how to get money. And this guy who gave me the lock, his parents called her to say, this is what you can do or whatever. Yeah. And I was also overweight. I'd never been happy. And I determined that I was going to get in shape. And I was 270 pounds, 280 pounds when I went in, and I got down over a 3-month period. I got down to 2.25. Okay. Because I wanted to look good for my wife. Yeah. That's when she also came and said, unless you can transfer this, I'll never talk to you again. Wow. And that's so. Okay. That didn't work too well because that was the last time I talked to her for several years.
That wasn't a good talk.
No, it wasn't a good talk. But
No. But how did you deal with that? Because that would have had to have been. I mean, we talk about this on this podcast. There's hard days in prison. Knowing that you and your wife were not going to be seeing each other or visits, how did you work through that?
It was brutal. I mean, it was absolutely brutal. About a month after I got indicted, my mother passed away, and my father was in his late 80s and not doing too well and everything else. And
how did he handle your situation?
It was almost a denial.
Yeah,
but it was the type of thing where my family, members of my family thought about the fact that my father really missed my mom when she passed. And, he was ready, but he was holding on until I got out. And I got out, had back surgery, so that got me out of the halfway house. I went over and stayed with him for about a month and a half before he passed.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Like
so at least you did.
My sister said, she said,
he willed himself to.
Dad was waiting for you.
Wow.
And, but so it's, there's a loneliness like you can never imagine. And I had a visit from some guys, later some other builders and some guys that came up together from St. Louis. It was very nice to see them. And when I'm there, they said, we just wanted to let you know that when you were going through all this, the FBI came to my office. One guy told me, he came to my office and they said, if you tell anybody that we've talked to you, we will charge you with obstruction of justice.
That scares people.
So literally, I found out now why nobody, literally everybody, you're shut off from everybody.
Death. Right.
And then you find out they're protecting themselves, but it's a lonely.
Yeah, I think it's strange too, Ed. You and I probably haven't ever talked about this, but being in prison, you're around all these people with 400 some odd people. But what you're saying is it's as lonely as you can be too. You're with people all the time, but it's a very lonely feeling.
I was in a room with 36 guys in bunks, and just in an area that was maybe 20 by 20 feet, and you're lonely. Now you develop some good friends.
You do.
And
talk about that, because I know you were a guy that because there were some people I knew that were there talking. You were the funny guy.
Well,
they enjoyed you.
I mean, it was the type of thing where I looked at it as a social scientist would see it, and I saw all the characters,
and there were
that you knew through history, and I even identified that there was people that if you remember the Cosby Show, Bill Cosby and the Cosby Kids, and they had every one of those characters is represented in prison.
Yeah.
You had Fat Albert, or Fat Albert in the Cosby Kids. You had Fat Albert at both prisons I was at.
Yeah,
was the big, heavy-set guy that had the bunk in the corner, that controlled all the contraband, and had a great laugh, and everything else. You didn't mess with them, but you still jovial. You had the guy Donald that couldn't talk, that would sit there and believe about but you had another guy that was a lanky basketball player, that would just. Yeah. Always, but you had all these various characters. Yeah. I even had it was amazing. The Prince from Coming to America. Yeah. Where Eddie Murphy comes and he's the Nigerian prince and everything else, and he gets there and at Leavenworth we had this one guy and he's talking like this. I can't believe that they did this to me. It was. I am just driving down the street and the police come and take me. And what kind of country is this? and he's there, and they talk loud and everything else. And I go to Pekin, and there's the same guy coming out of Africa. Not the same guy, but the same thing is there. This one, it was at Leavenworth that he was talking on the phone with his brother-in-law. And he's going, what do you mean you can't send me my money? That you send me my money because when I get out, I'm gonna get you if I come out. Well, that day, The cops listened to all the calls.
Yeah.
They heard him threatening his brother. They took him away and threw him in a medium or maximum security. Nobody saw him again.
That was it.
2 weeks later, we had a new prince from Nigeria.
Oh my God!
I mean, they literally replaced these people with
as characters.
As characters. And but I sat back and I looked and I realized, you know what? If I look at these people and just observe it, there's a great deal of humor.
Oh yeah.
And I even wrote letters on my computer. I'd send out, there's 12 people or 20 people you can put on your computer thing. I set out a weekly or monthly newsletter, what's happening.
All the characters.
Lebanon news and what you saw. And that's what I was able to talk about the one guy, my buddy Ron, the bank robber.
Yeah. Tell us about Ron.
Ron was incredible. Ron was a 75-year-old man, thin, but he was in good shape. He's been down for 25 years. He'd been in all the big houses and everything. And Ron would tell the story about how he did the orientation, and Bulldog, the CEO in charge of it, would sit there and he'd sit there with a group of people and they're in the orientation rooms, saying, "Welcome to camp." And he'd say, "Okay, tell me what you did on the outside. What got you in here? What are you going to do when you get out?" And he'd go to somebody and he'd say, "Well, I was an electrician. And, I got involved with meth and, got 15 years or I got 5 years. And when I get out, I'm going to go back and be an electrician. And be a good father."
Right.
Everybody's going to be a good father when they get out. The same stories. And you go to the next guy and, "Well, I was a car salesman." And etc. They got to Ron and Ron says, "Well, what'd you do when, before you got in?" He said, "Oh, I was a bank robber." He says, "Well, okay, but I mean, what did you do work?" He said, "Oh no, I was a bank robber."
Just a bank robber.
He says, "Well, what are you going to do when you get out?" He said, I'm a bank robber. That's what I do." And but Ron was the nicest guy who'd say, "Good morning, Eddie, and how are you?" And we'd smoke cigarettes together and everything else. One morning, Ron wakes up, after count at 5 o'clock in the morning. They come around, shine flashlights and everything by his eyes, and he gets up after count. He goes over to his jacket. He gets his jacket. And he gets out his. He's got a pouch of tobacco in there, and he's going to go out for work in the fields and in the garden. And he walks through the double gates, razor wire of Leavenworth, and just walks off to the thing. A truck goes by, and from the garage, from some inmates, and they say, "Ron, you want to ride?" He said, No, I'm fine. It's a beautiful day." Well, Ron just walked off.
He just left.
He had 3 years left out of a 25-year bit, and he was on the downhill side, and he just left. At 4 o'clock, they do the count, and Ron's gone, so they have a lockdown now for a couple days.
Horrible.
And Ron just walked up, and and the thing is, this is the first time in my life that I swear I ever rooted for the bank robber.
You wanted Ron to make it.
I hope Ron made it. He's such a great guy. I mean, this is a bank robber.
He's been in forever.
He's been in forever. Poor guy and everything, and just super nice. But I would sit there and I'd do right in the thing. I say, "Yeah, this past week, Ron, the bank robber," and I get back from one friend of mine who's a banker. And I said, "So Ron, the bank robber, just, get there." And then my buddy writes back, one of them writes back, and he says, "Oh, Eddie, that's terrible. This bank robber, I hope they get the guy." And I said, No,
we're rooting for him here.
We're rooting for him. But I started looking at it and writing the Leavenworth Gazette, so to speak.
Yeah.
To my,
I'm sure they enjoyed that.
Friends and family and stuff like that. And people enjoyed it, but it was also good for me.
Yeah,
because it kept things in perspective, kept humor.
Well, I think that's a good strategy. I
was going to laugh the whole time.
Well, no, I mean, we haven't really talked a lot about that, but that handling hard days or handling prison life, looking at the humor you could find in it, and then sharing that with people that you knew and getting feedback from that was probably a pretty good strategy.
My favorite movie of all time, one of my favorite movies of all time, was the movie Airplane.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just that every minute and every second of that movie, there's a joke. Yeah. There's a laugh about something. There's some mockery of something. Yeah. And I took that same attitude when I was looking at the situation that we're in and trying to find
some humor in it.
Because you know what? As human beings, we can overcome adversity.
Yeah.
We can always do well and everything else, and
isn't it strange, Ed, that when you go through something that we're talking about, your first day, you sat there and your mind's spinning and this is the worst that I've hit the bottom of the bottom. But it is amazing how you start stepping into it and you step a little bit more into it and you start adapting, and then it's not nearly as bad as what your mind made it out to be. Isn't that weird? You have this thing that that overwhelms your mind and it scares the shit out of you. But as you step into it, you're like, I can do this, and it's horrible, but it's not as bad as
I don't know if it's not as bad as you thought it would be, because it really is.
It's bad.
It is horrible conditions. You don't get health care.
Yeah.
We were living in mold, mildew, rot. There's fire. I mean, I know the building codes. And there was fire codes, building codes.
A lot of problems.
That were in violations of everything.
Yeah.
People would die in that building, literally, if there was something that happened. You're treated like animals. Yeah. You're just a number. Yeah. Sort of like from Les Miserables when you're, prisoner 51320. You know, it's that's all you are. Yeah. On there. So it is as bad. I guess
what I'm saying is
we adapt.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to say, is that you find that you can adapt to just about anything, and then in that world, you're adapting. That you are surviving in a way that you didn't even contemplate before. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's much akin to Tom Hanks in the movie when he's stranded.
Castaway.
Castaway.
Yeah.
When he meets Wilson,
a volleyball.
Yeah. And he adapts to, and this becomes life and everything else. Well, I mean, it really, in some instances, is that. Yeah. Drastic and how everyday life now is changed, but you're no longer a person, but you are in some of the people that you met. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had some friends like Ghost Bear was a Lakota Sioux, short little guy, stocky as hell, was tough, and we would walk and. Just go and spend the day walking the fence line back and forth. Yeah. Where I walk some days from anywhere from a mile to 15 miles a day on the thing, and just.
Well, it was so much better than being inside.
Oh yeah, it was better than being inside. But some of the people were just I met the former mayor of New Orleans. There's a little town out, or a city outside of New Orleans, Sidon, what was it, Sidon or whatever, but well known, that was their Mayor Eddie. Yeah. And, he's a smoker, but we would sit there and talk and joke and everything else, and interesting guy. I had one guy that came in, and he got towards the end of my time at Leavenworth before I got transferred, and he's caddy corner bunk to where I am, new talk, the guy, and I walked over to him. I just said, "Welcome to Leavenworth. I'm Ed," and everything else. He said, "Oh, are you Ed Levinson?" And I said, "Yeah." How do you? He said, "My father-in-law was your banker."
Oh my God!
Jim said to say hello, and he thought that you were a great guy.
Small world stuff.
Do it, and then I became great friends with Tim. With this guy Tim, and his wife and everything else were always, very, very nice and everything else. And you get into card games with your group, and you're watching TV. And
you create relationships to survive, and those relationships are part of your routine. Mm-hmm. And when those people leave,
you had your car.
Yeah, you have your car, which is what they call the people you hang around in prison, and they help you do your time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. It was also fascinating. There was people that were. Some people, like one guy in particular, I remember at the masonry department, that was there when we were working on the warden's house, and he sits there and he says,
"What were you guys doing at the warden's house?"
Well, it was the old warden's house, the original one. We literally rebuilt it.
Rebuilt the warden's house.
We rehabbed the whole building, gut rehab, and created law offices.
The inmates.
For the inmates, created the law offices for the staff, but what was I going to say?
What would they do without the inmates? Because the inmates do everything on the campus of the
everything.
prison.
It's incredible what happens. I mean, you guys were talking the other day about the hamburger franchise and stuff like that. We had, Cisco did our, hamburgers on the things. He, the fall off the truck
it falls
from the warehouse, food warehouse, and get its way back, and you'd have cheese on your cheeseburger and some onions that they would find.
Live in real life.
People on Friday, that was a big thing to buy it, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah. Tell me about when you started getting close to the door. You had short time. What did you start thinking about as far as what your life was going to be like getting out?
I knew that I could overcome anything and any adversity, and you would just make do with it. I learned that, I can sleep in and live in a 8 by 10 foot cell and don't get out for 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And the whole, you can learn, live and adapt. I was counting the days down. I was in the RDAP program also, which is, the U.S. attorney didn't want me to get. Yeah. Even though they caught me with some cocaine in my system, he was just the U.S. attorney was.
Well, I don't want to get you a year off, but I mean that program's a 9-month program.
This was a miserable guy, but I got it. Yeah, I got him there, and so you're working, and you've got your graduation ceremony and everything else, and I was quote unquote selected as the torchbearer by the group before to be the thing. So I had a special speech I had to make and to the group, and so you're thinking about that. You're thinking about the excitement of getting out, but you don't know. And when I got out, I wasn't going to make any waves at all. I was going to meet my probation officer, do whatever they said, get the job, not try to get any special favors or anything else. And I remember the thing when I got picked up at the 11 at Pekin at the thing by my daughter and a good friend of mine who's an attorney, and drove up with her and got back and went to the halfway house, which is a worse place than any prison you can go to.
It's the oldest halfway house in the United States.
Oh, yeah. And there was literally, when I was at work one day, somebody went outside the halfway house, got in a car with his girlfriend, and somebody pulled up, got out of their car, blocked him off, and shot him with an AK-47 47 times into the windshield, right in front of my window. Right. If I would have been in the building, I would have been looking out and seeing that. And that's what they did at Coke Brilliant. And
it's a very bad area of town.
A horrible area of town. But
how long were you there?
I was there only a couple months because I ended up going to work and my back went out.
Yeah.
And I had to get back surgery. And so needless to say, I go in for surgery, and the doctor said I couldn't do anything with steps and sleeping on the ground. I had to, be raised up, and they couldn't do it. So they made arrangements and let me go to my dad's. But the point is that when I first met my parole officer, she sits there and talks to this one guy, and this one guy named Cody says, I'm going to, you can trust me. I'm going to be good. I'm not going to do anything. And she said, Cody, let me tell you something. You shot a pistol, an automatic pistol, into a playground filled with children.
Right.
So you think I'm just going to turn my back and trust you that you're going to do, you did that. Now, this is who I'm in with, and I'm getting treated the exact same by her.
No, it's exactly
as him.
Yeah.
It's she hates
everybody.
Equally,
right?
On the thing, and so it was something where you did not want to rock a boat. I didn't want to be. They could pull you back and throw you back in prison or whatever. I didn't want to get violated with anything.
Well, and they scare you with that. I mean, even to the point of getting there to the halfway house, they tell you if you're late, that they could send you back.
Oh yeah, if you're late, and drug tests and everything else on the thing. So it was just if you're not working, then you get thrown back in. And I shared a room at the halfway house with a guy that knew he was going back and actually did get hauled back in.
Yeah.
Because he would go out and when he had time to get away or whatever and just get stoned out of his mind with anything and everything. Great guy, though. Turned me on to Big Bang Theory. I never watched Big Bang Theory until
I got to tell you that I don't know if you were in the basement of that Dismas house, but that's where, when I got there was all these bunk beds in this basement. It was hotter than hell. And there was only me and another guy down there. And he just gotten there that day. So I thought, well, maybe this isn't going to be so bad because, there was, I think, 3 stories to that place, or 4 stories. And so I'm in the basement of this place. And about 2 or 3 in the morning, the lights come on, and all the bad boys from St. Genevieve who've been sent to that bad place have put them back into the Dismas house.
Yeah, that's because the jail is it.
And man, was that a trip, and scary too, because these were the bad guys, and you just you're the excitement of getting out of prison. You're put back into the mindset of, man, I got to adapt all over again right here, right now.
Oh yeah, it's the humiliation and that you feel that you get, and you're ostracized. I mean, and that's one of the things that's haunted me since I've been out too, in terms of that my own demons that I had to plead guilty, or I pled guilty to committing bank fraud.
Yeah.
Never in my life did I ever want to hurt anybody or cheat anybody out of anything.
Right.
And
you had a lot of pride in what you'd built up.
I had a lot of pride. I ran for the city council, got elected by a huge margin against an incumbent.
Yeah.
Got elected, a couple of times. I was on boards, commissions, and did all sorts of things. And now here I am. I'm an admitted fraud. And it still to this day affects me because, why would anybody trust me?
Right.
Here I am, there. I did talk to somebody about possibly getting a job at Morgan, and they said, well, you can't because you committed a felony. I talked to one gal when I was, out and everything else, and she knew all about my story. I knew, and she was crying that I got mistreated because she, heard about it and everything else. And I said, well, let's go out, for drinks. And she said, yeah. And then the next day I talked to her, and she says, you know what? I work at a stock brokerage, and I can't go out with somebody that committed bank fraud.
Yeah.
I can't be seen. So it's just like,
you live with it as a life sentence. That's the thing that you have to learn, that you have to adapt to that. Once you've decided that you're going to step into that world to be somebody who pleads, and then you know that you're going to live that life, you have to almost come up with a strategy to how do you live that life as an ex-felon. Because there was somebody's telling me a story the other day about a guy who came back. He's gotten involved with this church over here in West County, and he wanted to be a greeter at the church. And they do background. It's a big church. They do background checks on the people who work or volunteer, and they wouldn't allow him to be a greeter. So that's even within. That's not in business. That's in this church and personal life. So, obviously there should be different levels of how you see somebody. Like you just said, somebody that shot into or maybe killed somebody or shot into a playground. It's a little bit different than a nonviolent type deal of somebody trying to have lunch or go to a church and greet. So I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. There needs to be some strong tweaks for people to get back into society, to be a part of society.
One of the things that's fascinating in that world is the guy that shot into the playground.
Yeah.
The bank robber.
Yeah.
The people like that have a certain stature, level of respect, and you just don't mess with the dudes. You give them some respect and everything else.
Right.
The white collar guys are really, in many respects, looked down on by the prison population.
Yeah.
Because how could that crook stole from my grandma? And, he's the one that was living the big life and thought that he could get by, and he's the privileged one, et cetera, et cetera. And so you really, it's literally like the Alice's Restaurant song, where, you're looking down the bench. Yeah. And everybody slides away from you.
Well, and I think that's why,
bench.
In prison, eventually you create relationships of people and they get to know you. They can make their own decision. But I agree with you that is a stigma that you carry being in business.
Well, and then you carry it out.
Yeah.
On the thing. Although a lot of people have told me, Eddie, it doesn't make a difference. When I worked at the car dealership, I was talking to the owner, basically offered me the job, and I said, I really don't know anything about selling cars.
Yeah.
I'm not really a salesman. I did that. He says, and the guy had actually been one of my bankers before I went in that owned the dealership, and he said, Eddie, he said, you know how to treat customers.
Yeah.
That's all that counts.
Yeah.
You know how to treat customers. I think you got ripped off.
Yeah.
There's no reason you should have gone with you through. I'd love to have you working for us. And I thought that was really nice.
Well, and he did a good job too. I mean, that you didn't know anything about that business, but you built a reputation because you were given an opportunity. That's the thing that I guess that's what I'm talking about is legitimate opportunities. Mm-hmm. They were talking about the other day, they were having a hard time getting people to work. And they created this job fair for ex-felons. And they said that the people who were interviewed after that put on this job fair said they couldn't believe how much gratitude they got from these ex-felons, that they're really actually having a real opportunity to be interviewed.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a needing to be a coming together of understanding. A lot of these guys are, they're trying to get jobs, and the probation officer's making it impossible for him to get to the job, and then they're saying you have to have a job, but then it's impossible to get to the job because of the things you're putting on.
And then when you have a job, your halfway house gets half or a quarter of what you make. So you have to give them a check right up. On my restitution, I have to take out, of any check. So it's trying to get ahead.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And that's something that the more understanding, I think, the more there is that people would say, well, we need to tweak it a little bit.
It's also one of the things where, and I thought of you in your situation in that regard, where I've got a thing on bank fraud. I was in the building business. I did this and that. Your family and your father went in and got charged because he sold insurance, even though he had a fraud thing before and shouldn't have been able to.
Right.
And now he's paying a price for something that you would think because he went to work in a particular industry. And now I'm looking at myself and I'm going, wait a second. If I go in and if I try to build something, number one, can I do it with a bank?
Right.
Number two, how can I look an investor in the eye?
Right.
But number three, if I did it, would they throw me in jail and say, no, you're not allowed to be in this business?
Right.
You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know. And to find out, you really have to get a lot of legal research.
Which costs money.
That you don't have because you lost it all.
Yeah.
On the thing. So it's an incredible
it is.
Cycle or whatever.
It's a cycle, and there's some things, that could create more opportunities that could limit the recidivism of the reason why it's so easy to get back.
If they wouldn't have come after me and everything else, and like in prior recessions and stuff, I could have gotten everybody paid back. Yeah. As I waited on the time and did it. And
some people were given that opportunity.
Some people were. We're always given that opportunity.
It's only a few people they selected out of the thing, and then there were gigantic corporations that were allowed to skate through.
Giant corporations. The other people that were allowed to escape were. I made the one mistake was in terms of that. Prior people, when they were so far upside down on a piece of property, they would walk into the bank and they'd say, "You know what? Take it back."
Yeah.
Because there's no way, and the bank would say no, let's
we'll
work this out.
Yeah.
Okay. With me, the bank was able to take it back and sell the property for more than I owed.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the thing. If there's a workout on something, it should be worked out. Throwing somebody in prison is such a complete life changer for families. It doesn't just affect the person who's going to prison. It affects layers of people around you, and those people get hurt, and that's something that. And I know you've been able to stay close to your daughter. In fact, tell me about that, because you've been out and about, and I know she's out in Arizona.
Right.
I see pictures of you with her. That's got to be something that's really good in your life.
Oh yeah, I mean one of the biggest things was missing her high school graduation.
Yeah.
missing getting her first car.
Yeah.
Because
those are life moments you miss.
Those are life moments that you miss. I talk to her weekly. Every week I would talk to her. I would talk to my father.
Yeah.
When I was in prison, and for the most part, that was what
that was your connection to
my connection to the real world and everything else. And Suzanne, when we got out, she is marvelous. She's fantastic. The way that she's independent. She's a smart person. She's got a great personality, great sense of humor.
Gets it from her dad.
She's bossy as hell, which she gets from her mother. It was one of the things that when she was born, I mean, it was like she was 1 or 2 years old and started bossing us around. And I'm not going to do, and I'm going, this is nothing where they're taught. Yeah. It's genetics.
It's DNA.
It's in DNA. And she moved out to Phoenix. She said, I don't want to go out here unless you do. And I said, no, go.
Yeah.
I never had the opportunity. I never took advantage of the opportunity to move out of town in a whole new city for years, except for a couple of years at University of Missouri. And she went out there with her boyfriend, who is now her fiance, and they both got their jobs and everything else, and meeting people, and got a house, and
that's great,
doing marvelous. And I'm going to go out and actually visit her for Thanksgiving.
That's great,
for the holiday, and I'm proud as punch. You really are. It's that.
No, it's great. And Ed, wrapping things up, what haven't I asked you, or what, if there's anything you'd want to impart to the listeners about you or your feelings about things?
Well, I was disappointed in the criminal justice system in terms of how it worked. But it is what it is in that regard. It's amazing how we adapt to situations, and there's people that you see in prison that will be there for years, and that's the only thing they know. They're institutionalized. But there's other guys like a guy named Fish that spent 20 years behind the wall. Now he made it to the camp, which means he's less than 10 years out the door, and if not sooner. And you would walk in this one black guy, and he'd sit on the bench looking out at the fence, out at the road, and he'd just stare, sitting by himself. And I sat down, I talked to him, I said, "What's it?" He says, "You got to understand, man." He said, "I did a bunch of stuff when I was, out." He said, "But I've been in behind the wall for the last 20 years. I haven't seen a car. I haven't seen a motorcycle or a bicyclist that are doing this." He says, "I'm just taking it in, and it's amazing what is going on this world out here and everything else, and I'm just taking in and savoring every minute." And it puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
And perspective is the single most important thing, is that when you think you've got it really tough out here in real life or whatever, no, it can be hell. I mean, I've never been to war. I can't imagine what it's like going to war. And similarly in prison, you can't imagine when you're sitting there in a catatonic state with people that you are positive are going to kill you and stab you, and there's filth and there's disease and there's everything else, but yet you go in there and you adapt, and it becomes a part of you, and you get used to it. And every Wednesday we would watch Survivor, and you'd have American Idol on the thing, and the people, and it's hysterical because you're watching American Idol or something like that, and you get these big bruising guys that are 400 pounds that eat raw blood vessels in their teeth and everything else, and they're saying, "Oh, I just love her. Isn't she marvelous? I mean, listen to her voice is an angel from," and you're just laughing. This is a mass murderer. And a great guy.
What do you think, Ed, that you appreciate about being out? What would be the thing that you look at and say, "Yeah, this is what I really like. This is good"?
Control the clicker.
Yeah.
I can watch what I want.
Yeah.
You can get in your car and go anything. You can eat anything. You can make the cooks and the chefs in prison are just incredibly resourceful. And you were talking about that the other day in terms of what you can do with a microwave. It's the ability to make decisions on your own. I don't right now as of this. That's point, freedom. I was 5 years on supervised.
Yeah.
Supervised
release. Yeah.
And during that period, so I got out in 2013, and now I'm going to 2018, and I'm finally the last couple of years where I'm not.
Yeah, you're free.
Answerable to anybody.
Yeah.
For anything in that regard, I still have those same responsibilities to society.
Yeah.
And I take I take that part seriously, but I don't have to answer to somebody that is just. I thought I really got the impression that a number of these people, some of them care or nice people, are there for the right reason. Mm-hmm. Some of them are there because it's a paycheck and they just don't want anything else, and other people are just mean.
Yeah.
They're just rotten people.
Just mean people, yeah.
And the same thing with the prisoners. You had a third of the prisoners who were just bigoted, mean, nasty people that were just as selfish as anything you could find. You had 2/3 of the people that were really good, fun, nice people. I mean, you're talking to, you were with a shot collar, and he was your buddy, and he was a good guy. Yeah. Now, it was like a buddy of mine that I met up there. He was the president of a motorcycle gang from up north, the Midwest or whatever, and I mean, a real motorcycle gang and everything. Yeah. Now, to become president, there's things that you have to
probably have to do to get that job.
To get there, but Scott was one of the nicest people and a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And it teaches you on the outside, I've been able to see, there's goodness in a lot of places you don't expect it.
I like that. Ed, that's a good place to end it. That is a nice statement. I really like that.
Well, I'm proud of what you're doing here, Brett. I think it's a great thing. It helps you because it gets it off your chest and everything else. But the people that are listening, hopefully, I mean, I've been listening to your podcasts, and I've really enjoyed it. It's brought back memories. This stuff like, you should never forget.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Ed. I really do. So everybody, Ed Levinson, thanks for being here today. And I'm really, really appreciate the continuing follows and likes. I'll have more news next time. I've got Nightmare Success, my book, that's going to be coming actually out sooner than I thought. January was going to be the date. We're actually going to put it into December, and I will be giving you guys information on that. So everybody,
do I get an autographed copy?
Yeah, exactly, Ed. Everybody. Thanks for being here today. Nightmare Success, in and out.